Hey everyone, welcome to today's episode. It is January 16th, 2025. Don't forget to engage your channel, like, subscribe, leave a comment, share the podcast. Sorry about the late start today. Having difficulties getting the show together, but thanks for joining me today. So, top of the news is the fact that major U.S. politicians, Minority Speaker Hakeem Jeffries, as well as reporters for the mainstream media, keep talking about what the ICE operations in terms that only seem to inflame their constituency into attacking law enforcement performing legitimate law enforcement duties. Well, thanks for joining me today. We're going to get into almost 40 headlines. So in the next hour or so, like I do every day, Monday through Friday, live stream at 10 a.m., go through the most stories, the most headlines out of any other media you might check into. So stick with me now for the next hour or so, where we're going to go through almost 40 headlines regarding the top breaking news of today. So without further ado, let's read the news. We're going to start with the New York Post. Now, many of you might have seen what was happening in Minneapolis. Hateful anti-ICE agitators vandalize car with horrifying threat. Only good agent is a dead one. Now, I'm not going to play the video that many have requested to see about the Latin King and other protesters destroying a federal law enforcement vehicle, ripping out the weapons locker, and presumably taking the weapons. Which, what is that? And you don't hear a peep from Minnesota, Minneapolis politicians or the mainstream media about this sort of crime. I mean, already we have crimes against federal agents. Now we have crimes against federal property. And the stealing of weapons and classified material, which was in that vehicle, all serious federal crimes. Now, what's going to happen with this? So the Associated Press has the headline, Insurrection Act. How's it been used and what Trump wants to do with it? In the lead, they say Donald Trump would not be the first president to invoke the Insurrection Act, as he has threatened, so he can send U.S. military forces to Minnesota. But he'd be the only commander-in-chief to use the 19th century law, and this is how they frame it, and this is obviously a problem. Whether it's a 19th century law, it's not a 19th century law, it's the law. To send troops to quell protests that started because of federal officers the president already has sent to the area, one of whom shot and killed a U.S. citizen. All right, I have to stop right there because this is what I'm talking about. Mainstream reporters, and we're going to see an interchange between Carolyn Levitt, the administration's press secretary, with a reporter. Actually, I think he was a columnist, that take this sort of tack. First problems with the Associated Press article is that whether it's a 19th century law or it's not a 19th century law, who cares if it's an 18th century law? It's the law. So referring to it as some sort of antiquity doesn't do it any justice. Then the Associated Press says to quell protests that started because of federal officers the president had already sent to the area. Was that the reason? Or was the reasoning surrounding this have to do with the fact that Democrat and progressive politicians are saying that what Trump is doing is illegitimate? Now, first of all, protests certainly should be allowed, but it's not quelling protests. This is riotous and illegal behavior, not protests. Oh, is it legal? Is it in the Constitution that in your redress of grievance that you can destroy federal property, seize weapons and classified documents? Is that a protest? As Tim Pool said just recently, it's no longer a protest. And Tim Pool urged the president to use the Insurrection Act now. He's weighing his options. He wants to be prudent, obviously. And then the Associated Press in their second paragraph adds that one of whom, federal officers, shot and killed a U.S. citizen, which leads you to believe, is out of context, certainly, which leads you to believe that they went specifically into this area to kill a U.S. citizen, or what they were doing. Federal forces typically are called to quell widespread violence, yes, that has broken out at the local level. Third scenario is outright insurrection. The story goes on to say, there is violence. Nicole, I keep calling her Nicole, Renee Nicole Goode, used her motor vehicle violently. And I'm going to get to a clip in just a second. I've been urged to show more clips, so that's what I'm going to do. Hopefully it'll go off without a hitch. That using your vehicle when ordered not or to stop, to shut off the engine, to get out of the car, you are being put under detention, arrest. If you're commanded to get out of the car by law enforcement officials, the reaction, the lawful reaction, is not to try to flee. So, is there widespread violence? I think destruction of property, I think, is violence. So I think the problem here is the mainstream media and some politicians are already trying to portray or use a narrative that is going to undermine Trump's use of the Insurrection Act. One American News, Trump threatens Insurrection Act deployment amid Minneapolis unrest. The Insurrection Act of 1907. Oh, they said it was a 19th century law. The Associated Press said it was a 19th century law. But it's actually 1907. So that would technically be a 20th century law, would it not? The Insurrection Act of 1907 authorizes the U.S. president to send military troops into an area to quell civil unrest by temporarily overriding the Posse Comitatus Act, which Obama gutted anyway, which Posse Comitatus Act says you can't deploy regular military on the streets of the United States. That doesn't mean guardsmen. That's a completely different thing. As it goes on to say, which restricts the use of military for domestic law enforcement purposes, has also been called upon since the 1992. It has not been called upon since 1992 Los Angeles riots, though it has been used more than 24 times since its signing. If the corrupt politicians of Minnesota don't obey the law and stop the professional agitators and insurrectionists from attacking the patriots of ICE who are only trying to do their job, Trump said, I will institute the Insurrection Act, which many presidents have done before me, and quickly put an end to the travesty that has taken place in our one great state. They're referring to Minnesota. I want to get on to the second article. And there are many articles that I'm going to show you today that is going to dispute the stance of Minnesota politicians and the mainstream media. Let's call them corporate media. I don't usually quote Western Journal, but this one's good. Florida AG dunks on Minnesota by sharing arrest photo of woman accused of hitting ICE agent. We don't put up with this. I don't think it was an ICE agent. I think it was state police. Attorney General James Youthmeyer. This is Jennifer Cruz of Jacksonville. Jennifer disagrees with immigration enforcement and decided to commit 2 felonies by getting out of her car and punching a trooper in the face. But unlike Minnesota, we don't put up with this nonsense. Not today, Jennifer, which is going to be a rallying cry now. I want to get that on a t-shirt or hat. Not today, Jennifer. Which is a great, it looks like she's being arrested by ICE, by interfering with ICE operations. But the Attorney General says punching a trooper in the face, which means it's a state police trooper. Moving on with the news, Federalist. Resisting law enforcement is violence, and this administration's job is to stop it at all costs. He's talking about the Insurrection Act here. Eddie Scary. Betty Johnson posted on X, Democratic lawmakers in Minnesota are now encouraging anti-ICE rioters to pick up weapons and attack law enforcement. CNN said if they had weapons they used to attack the officer, would that have changed your opinion? Actually, no. In this interview, apparently, that CNN was having with a black individual, looks like Charles Blow. I don't know if it's Charles Blow. But the fact is that because everybody's up in arms because a Venezuelan illegal immigrant was shot in the leg yesterday or the night before last. Why was he shot in the leg? Because A, he was resisting arrest, which is, by the way, illegal, and was assisted in resisting arrest by 2 compatriots, also Venezuelan illegal immigrants, who attacked the ICE officer with sticks and shovels, which are weapons. And that's why the CNN anchor asked this individual if they had weapons to use, they used to attack the officer. Would that change your opinion? No. Federal officer ambushed and fired defensive shots. You could see how the mainstream media, maybe not so much CNN in this instance, but obviously the AP, and we'll see the New York Times doing the same thing. The article goes on to say, resisting law enforcement is an act of violence. It endangers not only the officers engaging the suspect, but anyone else in the vicinity. Indeed, that's the whole point. They act the way they do. If someone's a threat to a police officer, they're an increased threat to the general public. Aiding the resistance is no less dangerous and thus equal act of violence. The only conclusion then is for the administration to treat the activity in Minneapolis as what it is, a violent insurrection. Public safety demands it. And I happen to agree there. I think he's just going to be measured in his response. So, next up from Fox News, watch ICE take down illegal alien who allegedly, I don't know why they keep doing this, allegedly rammed law enforcement vehicles, nearly running over officer. DHS Assistant Secretary Tricia McLaughlin, who I just saw yesterday, who is actually pretty gorgeous. I didn't realize. Because I've been quoting her all this time. Blamed pro-sanctuary politicians, she said, have encourage illegal aliens to evade arrest. Indeed, if you think you have support by the powers that be, the local politicians, you could certainly evade arrest. Let's see if we can't.
Open the window. Watch out behind you, watch out! Holy. Watch out front.
So there you go. Right? Yep, and he just doesn't have the power to push the vehicle out of the way, and so they take him down. See, and he has his weapon out. Perfectly legal. Yeah, you're in the
reaction. ICE Director Todd Lyons. Todd, I mean, if that.
So you see right there the fact that this is what ICE agents have to do on a daily basis, is particularly if they're trying to make an arrest with somebody in a motor vehicle. They go on and on and on, dealing with these people that are basically using their motor vehicles as a weapon and to try to evade arrest. I don't understand why people do this. Now, back in my younger years, I had some run-ins with the police, and you try to wiggle out of things as you always did as a child. But you can't, because it's the power of the state which is behind these law enforcement officers. So you can't really get away. Do people get away from police? Sometimes. So there is a chance. But do you think they won't put a warrant out for your arrest if they know who you are? So that's going to end up hanging over you basically forever. You could flee the state. You could flee the country. You could be on the run. But then you become a fugitive from justice that may catch up with you. And that's if you get away. More than likely, the police will catch up to you and then use even more force to subdue you. So particularly if you're innocent, and running away is always an admission of guilt. Particularly if you're innocent, you should just allow yourself to be apprehended and fight it in court. More from Fox News. Latin Kings gang member accused of vandalizing FBI vehicles, stealing government property in Minneapolis. FBI Director Kash Patel says Raul Gutierrez, a Latin Kings member with a violent past, was arrested. Latin King gang member was arrested after allegedly, why do they say allegedly, stealing government property from an FBI vehicle vandalized during unrest in Minneapolis Wednesday night. Raul Gutierrez, 33, was arrested Thursday in a joint operation involving Department of Justice, Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms. So, of course, he allegedly do this. He's going to face the accusations in a court of law. Okay. But he's a gangbanger. Here, let's show his picture. So this guy, okay, obviously sees no problem with breaking into a federal vehicle and then stealing the weapons, because that's how he gets by in life, is he steals and cheats and lies and commits violence. Which is easy, which is the easy way out. The hard way out is to live within the confines of the law, or morally walk the narrow path. So people don't like me to moralize, but there is a moral component to life. To reject that, is ridiculous. And people don't really seem to know the difference between right and wrong. and good and evil and all these different things. Why? Because people, not all people, some people, don't understand that. Don't understand there is a black and white component to life. It's a duality of life. Not saying that there's no gradient or gray area. Obviously there is. But it's bipolar, for lack of a better word. And if you've ever researched their the 7 hermetic principles, which is a basis of a lot of Western mystic philosophy, let's say. All right, New York Times. New York Times, federal agents shoots man in Minneapolis, prompting tense protests. He's not an illegal alien. He was not a fugitive. He wasn't resisting arrest. He's not a Venezuelan national, right? He's not a Venezuelan national. Wasn't subject to arrest. He wasn't fleeing arrest. He's just a man in Minneapolis. They do eventually have to mete out the truth here. The agent shot a Venezuelan man who was resisting arrest, officials said. Protesters and law enforcement officers clashed for hours as city officials urged people to go home. Why would they do that? Why would they urge people to go home? You know, there were actually people within that neighborhood that started complaining and said, shut the fuck up and go home. Because there were other residents that they said, we have children sleeping. We don't need this shit. Agreeably. I often have issue with neighbors because they let their dogs bark, or they have the kids have sports exhausts on their cars and they rev them at early hours of the morning, etc. In any case, the story goes on to say, that's all I have from the New York Times. Next article up, New York Post, 3 men arrested for attempted murder of feds in Minneapolis ID'd as illegal immigrants from Venezuela. Not Minnesota men. Department of Homeland Security said the suspects, Julio Cesar Sosa Celis, Alfredo Alejandro Adjorna, and Gabriel Alejandro Hernandez Ledzima, were all in the country illegally and now in ICE custody. These are not good people. I mean, I don't understand. People think they're people from Venezuela. They're our neighbors. They're immigrants. These are young military-age men who, from my point of view, just looking at the pictures, not even undertaking what they did, is these guys are up to no good. They have the slashes in their eyebrows. That's trying to be to suggest that they're badass. These guys are not trying to make a wholesome life here in the United States, certainly. But people don't care, including Hakeem Jeffries. PJ Media says Hakeem Jeffries has just crossed a dangerous line that can't be uncrossed. Indeed, this is what he says. To all members of the Trump administration, the incitement and engagement in state violence, mark that, state violence, against the American people. They're not the American people. These are not American people. These are foreign nationals. Venezuelan, very likely Trinidad, because you don't understand, Castro did this a while ago, and it's been done many times before, is Venezuela emptied their prisons of prison gang members and other organized crime within the prisons, and on the condition they would go to the United States. State violence against the American people is a serious crime. Donald Trump will leave office long before the 5-year statute of limitations expires. You are hereby put in notice. And PJ Media goes on to say that wasn't an empty threat. He means it, and it would be a mistake not to believe he was serious. Hakeem Jeffries literally threatened ICE agents and Trump administration officials with future prosecution for doing their jobs and enforcing the law, which means, like we didn't see it during the Joe Biden administration, trying to purge conservatives, MAGA, people that served in the Trump administration, and going after them no matter what, no matter whether they have proof. It's just like going after Donald Trump, whether they have a case, they don't have a case. They'll do it at the very chance of sullying somebody's reputation. One America News. Levitt pushes back against journalists over ICE shooting. You're a left-wing hack. Earlier, you were defending ICE agents generally. Secretary Noem spoke to media and said that the ICE was doing everything correctly. 32 people died in ICE custody last year, 170 citizens were detained by ICE, and Renee Good was shot in the head and killed by an ICE agent. How does that equate to doing everything correctly? I think they're doing everything correctly, certainly. But what I'm going to try to do is go into this whole conversation. I'm just going to play you the video.
Two questions. First, a follow-up on one my colleagues asked you about our president's interview where you said that it was joking about canceling my elections. But Americans for generations have fought and died for democracy, for this democracy. Are you saying the president finds the idea of canceling elections funny?
Andrew, were you in the room? No, you weren't. I was in the room. I heard the conversation, and only someone like you would take that so seriously and pose it as a question that way.
Thank you, Caroline. Senator Elizabeth Warren said that the president called her earlier this week to discuss caps on credit card interest rates. I'm curious, would the president work with her and other Democrats in Congress on a legislative?
Our bosses, and again, at the direction of the law, they are simply trying to question. And you and the people.
Here it is. Sorry about that.
170.
With anyone in Congress for a good legislative fix that would benefit the American
Sorry
people.
about that.
And that's precisely why he called
Sorry about that
Senator
feedback.
Warren earlier this week on that matter.
Thanks, Caroline. Earlier you were just defending ICE agents generally, and earlier on Secretary Noem spoke to the media, and she said, among other things, that they are doing everything correctly. 32 people died in ICE custody last year. 170 US citizens were detained by ICE, and Renee Good was shot in the head and killed by an ICE agent. How does that equate to them doing everything correctly?
Why was Renee Good unfortunately and tragically killed?
Are you asking me my opinion? Because an ICE agent acted recklessly and killed her unjustifiably.
Oh, okay. So you're a biased reporter with a left-wing opinion.
What do you want me to do?
Yeah, because you're a left-wing hack. You're not a reporter. You're posing in this room as a journalist, and it's so clear by the premise of your question. And you and the people in the media who have such biases but fake like you're a journalist, you shouldn't even be sitting in that seat. But you're pretending that you're a journalist, but you're a left-wing activist. And the question that you just raised and your answer proves your bias. You should be reporting on the facts. You should be reporting on the cases. Do you have the numbers of how many American citizens were killed at the hands of illegal aliens who ICE is trying to remove from this country? I bet you don't. I bet you didn't even read up on those stories. I bet you never even read about Lake and Riley or Jocelyn Nungray or all of the innocent Americans who were killed at the hands of illegal aliens in this country. And the brave men and women of ICE are doing everything in their power to remove those heinous individuals and make our communities safer. And shame on people like you in the media who have a crooked view and have a biased view and pretend like you're a real honest journalist. Kelly.
Two quick questions on Iran. I wanted to ask first, just if you can say.
Right, there you go. You heard from Carolyn Levitt there, laying the truth out on that reporter. Wonderful news there. Wonderful news. All right, let's see if we can transition back to what we were talking about. And since I played that for you, I'm not going to read the rest of the text here. I'm just going to move on to the next story. New York Times is saying the CIA director meets with Venezuela interim president in Caracas. High-profile visit. I'm sorry there. I had to mute something, so. High-profile visit, which could be seen as snubbing the opposition, comes nearly 2 weeks after the U.S. military seized President Nicolas Maduro in a raid. Well, the reasoning behind this, if people didn't figure it out yet, the interim president was working with the CIA before Maduro was snatched. That's without a doubt. She signaled that if Maduro was no longer there, that she would have a different posture towards the United States. And that's why Trump decided to keep in the rest of the regime, because it's easier than trying to root out the regime, as we found out with the Ba'ath Party in Iraq, that leaving these people in, at least in the interim, and she calls herself an interim president, would work out to the United States' benefit. Moving on, AP, the Venezuela's Machado says she presented her Nobel Prize to President Trump during a meeting. Opposition leader Maria Corina Machado said she presented her Nobel Peace Prize medal to President Donald Trump at the White House on Thursday, even as he questioned her credibility to take over the country after the U.S. had ousted then President Nicolas Maduro. He didn't question her credibility. Originally, he did when he was asked, are you going to insert the opposition to take over the country? And specifically, Corina Machado, whether he's going to install her as the president. And he said that she lacks the credibility. Yeah, with the communists. So do you understand? It's just like in this country. If you're going to govern, you have to govern Democrats just as much as you're going to govern Republicans. So the reason being is that the regime, or people that support the regime, et cetera, are not okay with Machado. And installing her would upset that part of the electorate. Presumably, there'll be Democratic elections. So, to keep things nicey nice for now, they're going to keep in the regime. Anyway, back to the story. The Nobel Institute has said Machado could not give her prize to Trump. Yes, she can. She just did. As I said yesterday, it's a physical thing. She could give it to whoever she wants. Now, the Nobel Committee is not going to replace her name with Trump's name. You know, technically, she's still the recipient of the award. But it goes on to say an honor that he has coveted, meaning Trump, even if the gesture proves to be purely symbolic, which it is, it was extraordinarily given that Trump has effectively sidelined Machado, who has long been the face of the resistance in Venezuela. He has signaled his willingness to work with acting President Delcy Rodriguez, who has been Maduro's second in command. Well, the reason it being is that she was in part of the intelligence that led to Maduro being removed, et cetera, et cetera. So there was a lot of things working way before the raid even happened. And so they had a plan for interim government, keeping the regime, what's left of the regime, in place as long as they agreed to do XYZ, which they have. More from the New York Post on this story. Venezuelan opposition leader Maria Corina Machado presented her Nobel Peace Prize medal in White House meeting. I presented the United States the medal, Machado told reporters on Capitol Hill. I thought I had the picture here. I guess not. New York Times also has the story: Venezuelan opposition leader gives Trump her Peace Prize. She presented her prize to President Trump. And moving on from this story to something else of somewhat importance. New York Post says location of Charlie Kirk's suspect boyfriend Lance Twiggs revealed as family shares lover's descent into delusion before killing. This is a picture of Lance Twiggs before he went fembot on us. And a family member who remained anonymous on an interview with News Nation said, being as antisocial as they were, from my understanding, playing these games and being part of this Discord chat group, they didn't seem like they were in the real world. And to be honest with you, it's not just people that use computers and do all this stuff. Is whether people are wittingly or not part of philosophically known as postmodern thought, which means subjectively, whatever you're thinking in your head or feeling is your truth. And so right there, you're not living in objective reality. You're living in your own little world, as people like to say. And henceforth be part of progressivism because that's what they tout. All you have to worry about is your truth. You don't have to worry about everything else. Now, your subjective reality is a big part of your reality. I'm not saying it's not. I'm not just saying you should just rely on what everybody else says. Of course not. But you have to measure how you feel and think with how other people feel and think and see things. So the truth is usually somewhere in between. I don't say in the middle because you could be more right than the world, and sometimes the world could be more right than you. But in both instances, your point of view plays a big part in your reality, as does everyone else's to some extent. I like to speak in terms of orbits. If people are in your orbit, they have more influence in your POV than, say, some peasant living in China or something. What they think and believe has little to do with your point of view. Right. This is also big news from Fox News. Unearthed filing shows top teachers union funneling millions to far-left org social justice unionism. Bipartisan watchdog calls the filings completely divorced from the union's purpose. Indeed, I think so. A November Form L2 disclosure from the National Education Association's NEA, that's the biggest teachers union, filed in November. Why do they say November twice? And obtained by the North American Values Institute shows 2024 fiscal year spending that involved millions given to the social justice-oriented groups and far-left causes. And I'm not going to... $300,000 to the 1630 fund, a liberal dark money group. Fox News is blah, blah, blah. And there's more and more and more and more and more. 350 to the Schott Foundation, which describes itself as a BIPOC-led public fund that pools philanthropic funding and fuels racial and education justice moves. None of this shit matters. This weekend, perhaps, I might do an investigative piece just on OFA so people really understand how AFA spawned, I should say spawned, because technically, it's disputed, but technically OFA wasn't an umbrella group for other groups, but it spawned certainly other groups that took part in its training and its literature and then used these tactics and then shell within a shell companies, NGOs, all these different things. And so then OFA was absorbed back in the Democratic Party. And then once they understood how it does, you have different left-wing and progressive groups funding different left-wing progressive groups that fund other left-wing progressive groups that fund agitators and protesters that are all on the same page of OFA. training, tactics, and mission. Action. Goes on to say that their federal charter was granted because they promised to elevate the character and advance the interests of the profession of teaching and to promote the cause of education in the United States. Seen as their leadership and by extension their organization itself has morphed into a far-left insane asylum that is actively destroying their cause, that the charter no longer is defensible. Indeed. And everyone should know all the left-wing progressive groups all receive funding as the DNC does and politicians do, and then that funding is further disseminated throughout other NGOs, shell groups, that then funnel it through other organizations and other groups that eventually lead down to the people that are breaking into federal vehicles. I mean, these are the paid agitators, or paying the people who train the agitators that are sending the agitators out, whether they're paid or not. All right, let's get into fraud. New York Post, 2 scammers pleaded guilty to $68 million Brooklyn adult daycare fraud scheme. 2 Brooklyn scammers pleaded guilty on Thursday to defrauding a whopping $68 million from the frauds from the state's controversial Medicaid home program by paying health care kickbacks for services they did not provide at 3 Big Apple businesses. Manal Wasef, oh, here we go. These are BIPOC, right? And Elaine and Teo, both 46, pleaded guilty to conspiracy to commit welfare fraud. And there's more. 5 ophthalmologists caught in lucrative Medicare fraud. This is PJ Media. Our taxpayer-funded programs seem extremely vulnerable to fraud, including Medicare and Medicaid. 5 ophthalmology practices in Florida have agreed to a $6 million settlement with the federal government over their fraudulent billing to a third party for transcranial Doppler ultrasounds, according to the Department of Justice. The problem with the PJ Media article here is that we certainly are having a problem with folks seeing hold on a second. You try to do something here and with folks, well, with PJ Media, they don't describe I must have shut it completely. They don't describe the overall take that was billed out. Right? So they paid $6 million as a fine. So what did they bilk Medicare and Medicaid out of? 16 million, 20 million, 25 million? They don't say. So it's bad reporting. All right, moving on to better reporting from Just the News. New York Governor Hochul touts $4.5 billion statewide universal child care plan. Democratic New York Governor Kathy Hochul is touting her administration's plan to spend $4.5 billion on statewide universal child care program as she seeks another term in office. The plan includes expanding state-funded child care for 3-year-olds and eventually 2-year-olds. But she's not paying attention that the fact that the Trump administration plans to cut all this funding or hold back all this funding because of fraud. And we just demonstrated another 2 instances of fraud that, of course, wasn't nearly investigated during the Biden administration. Why not? Why is just because Trump is putting a priority in this fraud, in policing this fraud, because that's the way the Democrats roll. They just increase spending for programs that they can bilk or bill back or kick back or whatever. Same difference. Last week, Hochul teamed up with New York City Zoran Mandani to announce a plan to provide free health care, free child care. Free is never free. For 2-year-olds, beginning with a high needs area, okay, BIPOC. Hochul has committed $1.7 billion to fund the first 2 years of the program. She also highlighted the plan during her State of the State address. No bueno. So they keep doing this. They keep funneling money into these programs that is later used to grease constituencies, donors, and the politicians themselves. Also big news, which hasn't been widely reported, PJ Media, U.S. Coast Guard seizes another tanker defying Venezuelan blockade in the Caribbean. Motor tanker Veronica was seized by American forces in a pre-dawn operation on January 15th as it attempted to evade the blockade established by Trump administration. The Veronica, Guyana-flagged Aframex crude oil tanker, had departed empty from Venezuela's Amarui terminal early in January because I imagine they thought that the Venezuelans and the people that were using the tanker knew that it was because they were being shadowed. It was likely they were going to be seized. So why take on oil that would have been seized by the Americans? More news from the Intelligencer. This is the New Yorker. GOP may squeeze in a second big, beautiful bill before midterms, we can only hope. This is meant to scare liberals, by the way. This is the point. But we're cheering this on, so we're excited about this. But Republicans, conscious of the tough odds they face for maintaining control over Congress and eager to squeeze whatever they can from the remaining months of the trifecta governing power, have been talking for a while about something else, a second budget reconciliation bill using the same single-party procedures that gave us Donald Trump's One Big Beautiful Bill Act last year. The OBBA 2.0 now sounds like a possible way to reinforce the GOP's sudden interest in affordability. Well, what's wrong with that? Another catch-all party line bill is also a means for taking care of the base tending and constituency rewarding goodies that didn't make the cut in the original OBBA. So what is this liberal rag talking about? Well, they're projecting what they do onto the Republicans. As we mentioned previously, Ilhan Omar was trying to get an earmark for her for $1 million for a Medicaid program that was situated next to a restaurant she has special interest in. But in any case, the OBBA 2.0, hopefully, is supposed to reinforce this GOP's sudden interest in affordability. When Trump took office, he immediately banned the killing of chickens. That helped with egg prices immediately. He's been up the ass of the oil companies to try to get them to increase production, to lower fuel prices. Important. He went up against the pharmaceutical industry to lower drug prices, which he did. He's recently gone after the big banks to try to cut their interest rates on credit cards. This is all affordability. He cut taxes on overtime. He cut taxes on Social Security. He cut taxes on overtime. Did I say that? Overtime and tips. Yeah. That's not addressing. No, it's now, according to the Intelligencer, a sudden interest in affordability. Just be realistic. Like I said from the outset here, it's this constant propaganda narrative of painting the Republicans or MAGA or Trump particularly have no interest in anything that people need or want or whatever. Don't forget, in his first term, he had economic opportunity zones, which gave tax-free incentives for business to invest in lower income communities. It's just journalism has to be objective, and that's why Barry Weiss at CBS is saying you have to get the opinion of the White House or the administration with most shit. All right. More Fox News. RNC chair bets on secret weapon to defy midterm history, protect GOP majorities. Joe Gruder says Trump will barnstorm the country, that's the secret weapon, I imagine. Trump made stops in recent weeks in 3 key midterm election battlegrounds and said that the president's going to barnstorm the country with our candidates. More from Just the News. Bankers resist Trump's plan to reduce swipe fees, cap interest rates, call it misguided. And this is what I was just talking about. He's going up against the corporate monoliths here, including the banks, the top of the pyramid. Banks are pushing back against renewed efforts to cap interest rates for customers after President Donald Trump endorsed the move as he seeks to show Americans he's working to make life in America more affordable ahead of the 2026 midterms. Trump recently called for a 10% cap on credit card interest rates for a year and has endorsed a bipartisan credit card competition act, which would require big banks to enable at least 2 unaffiliated networks, including one other than Visa or MasterCard. He's teamed up recently with Pocahontas, Liz Warren, because she's always railing against the banks. So this is something he could do on a bipartisan basis. But no. The New Yorker says that he has no interest in making things affordable or trying to help the average American. What a bunch of bullshit. The goal is to increase competition and lower swipe fees, which credit card issuers charge to process transactions. Retailers, including the National Retail Federation, support the Credit Card Competition Act, as they should. So Trump is trying to make things more affordable, but don't forget, the affordability crisis was not caused by Trump. It's caused by Biden and the liberal spending, which raised inflation. And a lot of that money was not called for, but they appropriated it anyway. And then it sat there. Then they eventually, before Biden left office, instead of just leaving it sit there so it could be clawed back, he dispersed the funds to places like the EPA, among other places. You know, you put it out to grease your constituency, grease the donors, which indeed happened mostly through fraud. So it wasn't direct payments to these people. They were said, here's the money. This is how to get it. All right, some international news. Associated Press has the headline, Venezuela's new leader calls for opening oil industry to foreign investment and warmer U.S. ties. This is Delcy Rodriguez. Used her first State of the Union message Thursday to advocate for opening the crucial state-run oil industry to more foreign investment following the Trump administration's pledge to seize control of Venezuelan crude sales. This is what I'm talking about. The CIA knew she'd be cooperative. And so that's why they planned the military mission. It's because you know if you get rid of number one, number two is going to be good with you. Or better, certainly. And that's what she promised. Because if she didn't promise that, then there'd be another raid and she'd be gone. Perhaps. Who knows? Or maybe that's when you bring in the opposition leader. Tied to this, of course, is this Fox News headline, Latin American rebel groups urged to form super guerrilla alliance against Trump. Colombia's most wanted rebel leaders appealed to ELN and other factions to form insurgent blocs spanning Colombia and Venezuela. So you know ELN, we also know FARC. So Colombia's most wanted insurgent leader, Nestor Gregorio Vera, or Ivan Mordisco, released a video stating this fact. Yeah. Like I said, leftism is a conspiracy, if you didn't realize. So these are insurgents, but like FARC is left-wing. I think ELN is left-wing too. They're fighting against America. The question is, are they going to bring this federation of guerrilla groups into Mexico, team up with the narco-terrorists or narco-traffickers there, and or team up to left-wing groups in the United States? This could be, imagine a guerrilla warfare, a military, a militant insurgency in the United States. Could happen. Zero Hedge, UK government threatens to return Lucy Connolly to jail for sharing joke post on X. If you don't know who Lucy Connolly is, she was sentenced to 2 years in prison for a post on X. But she's back because she made a joke about Keir Starmer. According to an X post by Dan Wooten, Lucy Connolly has already spent 10 months locked up for a singular post on X, is facing a recall to prison because she retweeted a joke about Donald Trump. It's satire arresting Keir Starmer. Officials told her it was inciting violence. There is no free speech in the UK. Certainly not. It's gotten worse and worse and worse. And this is what we're facing, if people don't understand. We're facing the abolishment of our individual liberties that are enshrined by our Creator, but also enshrined into the Constitution. That's what being really free, the freedom, is having these constitutionally protected liberties, because liberties are political freedoms. But I'm not going to digress too much into that. Running out of time. Next up, Associated Press, Canada agrees to cut tariff on Chinese EVs in return for lower tariffs on Canadian farm products. No, Canada has agreed to cut its 100% tariff on Chinese electric cars because it can't reach a deal with the United States. Canada has always been communist. It's communist now. It was communist under Trudeau. They allow the Chinese military to train on Canadian soil. They allow Chinese scientists to steal secrets, really secrets that were developed in the United States. They've really given up, just like Europe has given up, the UK has given up, and has bowed to the Fabian socialists. And don't forget, socialism didn't start in China or Russia, started in Germany. Really, it started in France. So it has its roots in Europe. And there's always been a contingent within Great Britain, the United Kingdom, because of the monarchy. And as I said, socialism is the controlled opposition to the modern aristocracy, corporatocracy, and the remaining monarchies. Goes on to say Canada had been aligned with the U.S. on tariffs, but now recently broke because Trump wanted he called for a united front against China because China is predatory and communist, which communism is the exact opposite of most of the Western political ideals. It doesn't matter. I mean, to go on and try to explain to people that communism, socialism is the enemy of a free society, and the New World Order wants to impose global communism and socialism because of the upheaval that's going to be caused by the technocracy involving AI. That's going to displace all human endeavor, not just jobs, but anything you want to do that you could contribute to society, will be done better by silicon performance. Goes on to say, China sees an opening under Trump. China is hoping Trump's pressure tactics on allies such as Canada will drive them to pursue a foreign policy that is less aligned with the United States and more aligned with them. Zero Hedge, China leads global coal power additions despite renewables push. Right, like if you didn't know what was going on here, China, increases their power output with coal all the time, and nobody, despite renewables push, they make renewables and sell them to the West. Meanwhile, they use oil and coal, but nobody's protesting their greenhouse gas emissions. Some tech news really quick before we cut out here. Federalist, parents must actively opt out of turning their kids into digital age zombies. The highest civic skill in the digital age is not coding or content creation, but ability to look away. Indeed, everybody's got to take time to look away from social media particularly, but the internet. The thing is, too, is you shouldn't have notifications on your social media because every time you get that Pavlovian response, bing, oh, look, somebody responded to me, bing, oh, look, oh, bing. There's a certain point for some reason that I had notifications for texts only, especially audio notifications for text only. So if someone texts me, I hear it. But I also have visual notifications for news. So when I look at my phone, I see that notification. But for some reason, they take over my phone and I'm getting bing, 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 and I don't have anything there. And I don't know how to turn off that notification. It's just binging like crazy. I can't stand it. So I have to turn off the audio completely because it's so fucking annoying. So the article goes on to say, television was merely the prototype for the power that cell phones and tablets have over the population. The danger was never the screen itself, but what happens when a society allows its dominant media to define how truth is presented or the lack thereof, how politics is understood, and how meaning is measured. I couldn't agree more there. Meaning is something you need to develop. First of all, you have to remember what you see and read. And then when you're alone with your thoughts outside, perhaps, that you can develop meaning by all the inputs that you have garnered throughout the day, that at a certain quiet point, you have to figure out what they mean. And that's what we try to do here on this podcast. Next up, post-millennial fake AI singer on Spotify has nearly 3 million listeners as music industry is taken over. Spotify goes on to say that a soul singer boasting nearly 3 million monthly listeners is competing with global pop stars like Ariana Grande and Sabrina Carpenter. But there's a catch. On the surface, Spotify singer Sienna Rose has risen rapidly an artistic success. However, Rose is not a real person, but an AI-generated artist. Like I said, AI is going to undermine and supplant all human endeavor, especially the ones that make money. This week, it was revealed that Sienna, reportedly earning over $2,500 per day on Spotify, does not exist. Since September, she has released EP Velvet Embrace, multiple projects, and so-called debut album Honey on the Moon. And Spotify says, we do not create or own any music and does not promote or penalize tracks created using AI tools. And I just want to revisit this one really quickly, even though we're over with the 1 hour mark. Fox News Australia removes 4.7 million kids from social media platforms in the first month of historic ban. Australia officials are touting early success of the landmark social media ban. Like I said, this is just a authoritarian test. It's always to help the kids. It's always, you introduce these draconian measures as helping. I'm helping. We're helping. So I think that's it for moi today. Thanks for Ronaldus Magnanimous for posting any of the live chats. We really appreciate that. Don't forget to engage the channel, like, subscribe, leave a comment, and share this episode. Join me every day, Monday through Friday, live streaming on Rumble, YouTube as well. Remember, you're under attack psychologically, most particularly, and biologically. So stay hip to that trick. All right. Happy Friday. Have a great weekend. Like I said, I may have a special report coming out this weekend on OFA since people really don't understand what it is. And might have that coming out Saturday or Sunday. Otherwise, I'll see you next week. Respect.
Less than 3% of you people read books. You can't handle the truth.